Hey guys, welcome back to the studio and thank you so much for joining me. Today I'm going to be teaching you how to do a rolled handle. This technique and shape of handle will massively elevate the quality of your handbag. And I'll introduce you to some tips and tricks that will help you along the way. So let's get started, shall we? Now we've cut out the leather for the handles, for the handle and the reinforcement. We're using French goat skin and it's 1.3mm thick, which is basically perfect. And we're using Salpa reinforcement. A rough guide for the thickness of the leather is 1.2mm thick, because you're going to be backing it with a bonded leather reinforcement, and that is 0.8mm. So you want a total thickness of 2mm thick. That's a really important thing to remember when making these handles, and the dimensions of the pattern will change if you change the thickness of the leather, because I'm going to be using 6mm thick leather cord for this. So if you change either the thickness of the leather, the thickness of the reinforcement, or both of these, or you change the thickness of the leather cord, your pattern will change, and you have to work that out individually, because obviously any of those variables will change any of those numbers. Now we've cut those out, we're going to glue them together, and I'll show you that now. Going to be using Intercom Eco Stick 1816B. This is the water-based adhesive I use for all of my pieces. Now we're going to put those to a side and let them dry. These are now dry. You know when they're dry because the glue goes completely clear. So we're going to glue them together. Place those down, line them up as best we can, place it down. Make sure that that is glued down really well. Make sure you've gotten all of it so it's fully stuck down. Now a little trick that I like to do is take some scissors and cut off the excess bonded leather. And I'll show you why that's helpful in a moment. So we're going to trim that off. The reason I've done that is because when we flip it over to put our pattern down, if we haven't done that, we'll have excess around the edges, and that excess we won't know from this side if it's actually got leather on the other side or not. So it's really helpful to do this. Next thing we're going to do is mark out the pattern on the back of the piece of leather. Perfect, so we've now got the pattern drawn out on the back. I'm going to get a cutting mat and we're going to cut that out. We've now got the pattern on both ends. We're going to take our cutting mat and we're going to cut those out. Now, because we won't be able to get to this edge after we've stitched it and attached it to the bag, we now need to go ahead and we need to crease and paint around the outside of this. Now, I'm not going to go into great detail when it comes to the edge painting because I've done a tutorial on that on my channel already. So if you want to go and watch that, please do. So I'm going to go quite quickly over that, but that's the reason we're going to be doing that. Now the edges are painted, I'm going to be punching the holes for stitching around the ends. Now it's really important that you do the same number of holes on each side. Now we've got to the end of there, we're going to go one further to over the top. And there we go. Alright, so now we've punched the holes on the end, we're going to mark the ends. We're going to mark both ends. We're going to draw a line between those two marks, and this is the line in which we're going to glue the leather cord to. So we're going to draw that line. This is 6mm leather cord, slightly over the end, so we know we've got enough. Mark it, and we're going to cut that. Taking our glue, we're going to put glue down the middle of the handle. But around this area, it's super important not to put the glue anywhere else. Put that off to the side, making sure to put a really good amount on. We're going to line up the cord that's now covered in glue. Making sure that it is exactly on that line. We're going to mark 25mm from the end. Now we're taking our hand skiver to 0. So now we've got these two patches. We've used the same leather that we've used for the exterior. We traced out this shape on the leather, and then using our calipers we measured 3mm, so it's 3mm smaller all the way around, but the same length as that. Use a sponge, or you can use a Q-tip, and we're going to very, very carefully apply glue to the top and around the edges. We're not going to put it anywhere in the middle. We have to line it up perfectly. Just at the corner there. First of all, we're going to stick it to the cord. It has to be just inside the stitch marks. You may have to bend it up slightly for it to fit. Take some scissors, cut darts in here. Now we're going to put glue on the rest of the handle, but we're not going to go any further than that tab there. Making sure the glue gets nice and tightly into the cord. Now the glue's dry, we're going to put the edges together. Start at one end and we're going to put the corners together. And it's really important that those corners meet exactly. So we're going to put those corners together and we're going to give that a good squeeze. Put our index finger on the top of the cord to push it down. And we're going to meet those. We go back, do the same again, making sure that the edges meet perfectly. It's really important that they do. And you want to place your crimping pliers on top of the cord so that when you squeeze, it pulls it in, as you can see. Take a needle, attach the thread. We don't need to put a needle on both sides. Tie the ends so they stay still whilst we're working on the rest. Go one hole back, so there's the last hole there. We're going to go into this hole here, through the other side, pull that tight. Do that a couple of times. Cut these threads off so they don't get in the way. I'm going to teach you guys a trick that you can punch all the way through on a flat surface. So we're going to take a bone folder, push it right up against the cord. Going to flip it over and do the same thing again. Go back to the first side, put the crease in there again, and what that's going to do is the first side is going to have the dip there, and the back side is going to be flatter, allowing you to put it on a flat surface. So using a roundel, I'm going to find the first hole, because we're not going to punch that again. So I found the first hole, and I'm just going to open that up so I can see where it is. But remember, we're not going to punch that through again, otherwise we'll risk double punching on the other side. And now getting our pricking iron, line up with the first hole, push gently, move it down one. Now ordinarily you'd have your pricking iron straight up, but for this we're going to angle it very slightly. Only 10 degrees or 20 degrees or something, not very much at all. Punch through. We're more or less lined up with that first hole. It's off slightly, but that doesn't matter. And make sure that we're lined up properly with that hole. Making sure we're not going at a weird angle. And there we go, we're perfectly lined up. So the last hole is there, and we're perfectly lined up next to it. Take our bone folder and push the threads down that way. Because if you hammer it and you accidentally hit the leather cord, you'll ruin your handle. Snip off the thread we used to keep it closed. I'm now going to use my divider to mark 3mm from the cord, and that'll be where I cut the excess off. Be using my Japanese knife, but please use whatever knife you're most comfortable with to do this. Trim off the excess leather. Now that's trimmed off, I'm going to take that over to my belt sander. Smooth the transition to the end. Now I've sanded it and creased it, I'm going to go and paint the edge of it. Again, I'm just going to breeze over that because I've done a whole video on it, and you can find that in the links in the description. Taking the panel, that's a stand-in for your bag, we're going to place the second half of the pattern, we're going to place it on top, mark it out with a silver pen. Using a round hole punch, I'm going to punch a hole at the bottom and the top of the panel. Now I've punched those holes, I'm going to take my 2-tooth pricking iron and I'm going to punch holes all the way around, from the bottom around to the top, making sure that there's an even amount of holes on both sides. We're now going to hold the handle by the very bottom where we want to stitch it, but we don't want to hold the entire handle because you'll damage that lovely shape that you've just put in. I'm not going to be casting on the back of the stitch because when you cast and put a knot in the thread, it will only tighten one stitch back, which we don't want to do. We want to be able to tighten all of the threads. When you get to the top hole, all you want to do is pass the front needle through the next stitch up and down the other side, leaving the back needle where it is. Get to the end, do half a back stitch. So that's the last hole, and then take the front needle tie it off at the back. And clip the tails off. And you're done. Okay guys, thank you so much for joining me today. I know it's been a longer one, but I hope it's been hugely helpful to you. As you can see, the end result is beautiful and you can get such a luxurious finish to your bag with the rolled handle. If you found this useful, please go ahead and subscribe. I look forward to seeing you next time.